What is going on, you guys? My name is Cody Thixton, and this is Interesting Podcast, coming to you guys on September 12th, 2023 for episode 70, where today I just wanted to sit down with you guys and maybe explain how I got into professional wrestling. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's get right into this. So I started watching professional wrestling in spring of 2005. I remember I was sitting there with my dad, and we were sitting on his bed, and we were kind of just watching TV, just scrolling through everything. Give me 1 second, you guys. I apologize. Oh, okay. All right, there we go. Awesome. I just had to go and turn off my fan. But I started watching wrestling in spring of 2005, and I was sitting on the bed with my dad, and we were just scrolling through the channels and whatnot. And I had gotten like a little bit of like a glimpse of it. And when I was growing up, my parents would watch like boxing. Like that was a big thing in my house when I was really little. And so I remember my dad kind of going through the channels, and I kind of got like a little glimpse of it. And I was like, Dad, what are you doing? Like the fight's on. And he was like, oh, no, that stuff is completely different. And I was like, what do you mean it's completely different? And he had gone back to the channel, and I didn't know this until I really got into wrestling. But my first person that I saw was Tajiri. And Tajiri would kind of do this move where he does like how do you call it? It's almost like he does like a front flip into the ropes, and then he springs backwards and hits the dude with an elbow. But when my dad had actually flipped back to the channel, Tajiri was going and doing that move, and he just hit the dude with his elbow. And I remember like looking at my dad, and I was like, what do you mean like that is how it is? Like what? And he was like, oh, no, that's like a terrible example. So like watch when they actually start to punch somebody. And then, obviously I saw everything, and I was like, dude, like this is freaking awesome. Like what channel is it on? And he was like, it's on 49. And back then it was actually known as UPN 49 here in Oregon. And I remember telling him like, hey, I'm gonna watch it on the TV. And ever since then, I've been absolutely hooked. Like it has been such a huge part of my life. Like even my dad would kind of joke with me a little bit, and he would say that this is like my religion, because I would watch it religiously, is how he would say it. Like every Friday night, UPN 49, I was there, because like I didn't really have cable growing up. And so, Monday Night Raw was on cable, and then Friday Night SmackDown was on for free programming and whatnot. And I remember when I was sitting there and I was getting into professional wrestling, the first tag team that I ever really attached to was Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. And I think everybody kind of understands this story, because the first major pay-per-view that I watched was SummerSlam of 2005. And that's when Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero were battling over the custody of Dominic, and they actually had a ladder match. And so like my expectations of professional wrestling, I guess you would say to certain people, are really low, because of the fact that I was actually able to get so into that storyline. But to me, it's also like the most perfect time to get into professional wrestling because, like I said, like I was able to attach to Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. And then to see Eddie Guerrero turn on Rey Mysterio, go into SummerSlam with the custody of Dominic ladder match. And then come November, Eddie Guerrero unfortunately passes away. And then we go forward into January at the Royal Rumble 2006, and we get to see Rey Mysterio actually end up winning after becoming one of the longest competitors ever in the Royal Rumble. And he dedicates his victory to Eddie Guerrero. So to me, that was like the most perfect time because it was like everything was built up. Like watching Rey and Eddie as a tag team, watching them turn on each other, watching that whole story going into SummerSlam, and then to know the connection that Eddie and Rey Mysterio had, and then for Eddie Guerrero to pass away in November, and then to see that storyline kind of build out, knowing their history, knowing how much they mean to each other, and then to see Rey Mysterio win the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 22. To me, it was just the most perfect time to get into professional wrestling, and it was insane. It was really, really cool to like now look back on that because I know that there's a lot of history in WWE. There's a lot of history as to why people like the Attitude Era so much, but the reason why I believe that the Ruthless Aggression Era is just a tad bit better. A tad bit. I'll give the Attitude Era its props, but I do believe that the Ruthless Aggression Era is so good because of the fact that, like, let's look at, Fit Finlay. Let's look at the Boogeyman. Let's look at Brian Kendrick and Paul London. All of these people were essentially like, they weren't really big stars. But they made such an impact in every match that they did, that they made a name for themselves to a point to where you can jump forward to 2023 and people like me are still going to bring them up because of the fact that they actually made a name for themselves, even though they weren't big stars. And that was something that I feel like you didn't really get in the Attitude Era. I mean, everybody kind of knows, Doink the Clown and, all of those people. People don't really remember a whole lot about what they did. So I think that like that's the reason why like the Ruthless Aggression Era is one of the best eras, and why I'm really, really proud at the fact that I was able to witness, the Ruthless Aggression Era and like really getting into it. And I think one of the things that I love the most about professional wrestling is the storylines. So when you get into professional wrestling and you understand the characters, you understand what they're going through or what they're about to go through, that's when you really start to attach to them. And I think the most recent memory that I've had where we really attached to a character, I was with my mom. And we actually went to DOA Pro Wrestling. We've Got Heat in Independence. And I've kind of corrupted my mom a little bit when it comes to professional wrestling. Like, I'll walk out into the living room. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning. It could be 7 o'clock. It could be 3 p.m. She's sitting there watching wrestling. Like, I've corrupted my mom when it comes to professional wrestling. And it is so cool to kind of see that transition where maybe somebody doesn't know a whole lot about professional wrestling, but then when they get into it and they understand why understanding the characters and the stories are so important. And the last memory that I have where we both really popped was at DOA We've Got Heat. And that was when Spencer Scott came out and saved Zay Perez from the dregs. And we didn't expect Spencer Scott to actually be there. Like, we thought that, he had gone to another state and that, he just wasn't going to be able to make it to the event. But following him on social media is the only way that you would kind of understand that that's how it could have possibly played out. So when Spencer Scott came out and saved Zay, both me and my mom, we popped. We were like, oh, yes, like that is so awesome. It was like the biggest surprise, and it was so cool because it's like that to me was one of the points in which my mom actually understood what professional wrestling can do to somebody when you actually get into it and you start following everybody and following the storyline and feeling the energy from the overall show. It is absolutely amazing. It is so cool. And another story to kind of, get into with my mom. So my first ever professional wrestling event was No Mercy 2008. It was October 5th. It was at what was called the Rose Garden during that time, now known as the Moda Center. And it was No Mercy 2008. And my mom had worked overtime. Like, she busted her ass to make sure that I was able to actually go to my very, very first professional wrestling show. And without, like, because my son being born is my number one most favorite day of my entire life. I feel like that'll never be taken away. But my number two most favorite day of my entire life was when I actually got to go and see professional wrestling live. And this was actually like a really special period because, we had Matt Hardy versus Mark Henry for the ECW championship. We had Candice Michelle versus Beth Phoenix, Triple H versus Jeff Hardy, Undertaker versus Big Show, Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho, and a ladder match for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. It was an absolutely mind-blowing event. Like, I'll even shout out What Culture Wrestling. You can find them on YouTube. I'm pretty sure a lot of the people who follow professional wrestling know who they are. But they had done a video in 2018 where they lined up the best, or the 10 best professional wrestling events from 2008 to 2018. And No Mercy 2008 came in at number 5. Now, they didn't line it up with the big four: Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series. They didn't line it up with those. But still, for there to be 10 years of existence and for No Mercy 2008 to be in the top 5 best professional wrestling pay-per-views of that whole 10-year period, and that was my first show that I ever got to see, it is freaking awesome. Like, every time that, history becomes made because of it, I'll go and I'll tell my mom why it's so important, because it means that much to me, and it really shows that, her hours of working overtime was worth it, because not only is that history for me personally, but that's history for WWE, and she sent me to go and actually be able to experience it live, and I can't thank her enough for that. So that's why I said, like, every time that history comes out about that event, like Chris Jericho, he was in a media scrum for AEW, which is, people will come and interview the wrestlers after the show and ask them about everything. And one person that had asked him about his rivalry was Shawn Michaels. Well, that was actually the accumulative event. So I got to watch the actual rivalry end at that event. And he had said, Chris Jericho, he is one of the biggest professional wrestlers in the world. And for him to say that rivalry was one of his favorite rivalries that he ever did in WWE, and then for me to see the ending of it, it was absolutely amazing. And so, like, I can't thank my mom enough for that. And just the overall environment of professional wrestling, I was just in such awe of. Like, I didn't really know how to conduct myself when I was sitting there at the Rose Garden and, like, the lights came up and the show started. I was just I was mind blown at what I was seeing. And I don't know. I mean, professional wrestling means a lot to me personally. You could probably ask anybody in my family, and they know that I've sat there and I've cried over professional wrestling before. Absolutely, because it means so much to me and has really helped me throughout my life. Because there were a lot of things that I went through when I was younger, and just being able to focus on every Friday night, being able to sit there in front of my TV and be able to just escape for 2 hours, where I don't have to think about the stress. I don't have to think about life. I get to dive into these new characters, these stories, how things build, getting anticipation, getting excited, you know, and I don't know, like professional wrestling has just meant so much to me that honestly, like I can't find words to describe it. And that's why it's so hard right now. So I apologize, but it is just to me one of the most perfect things that have come to fruition that you can actually watch on TV. And I've always explained professional wrestling like this. So I think everybody has gotten into a program on TV and then they start to binge watch it or something. And then at the end, you're like, damn, like I wish that just like it wouldn't end. Like the story is so good. Why can it not continue? Professional wrestling continues 24/7. You can go online, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, go on YouTube, anything, and you're going to find something that is going to accumulate towards a storyline. And that's what makes professional wrestling just absolutely amazing, is the fact that like it never ever ends. Really interesting fact, there is a professional wrestling WWE Raw for every single week in my life, because WWE Raw started in 1990. Every Monday night they have a show, which means every single week that I've been alive, there's a WWE Raw that I can watch. I would not be able to get through that amount of WWE events without more WWE events coming. So it's never ending. It doesn't end at all. And that is the most perfect thing about professional wrestling, is the fact that it's continuous. So you get more excited, you get more invested into the storylines. It is just absolutely amazing. So let's talk about favorite wrestlers. So obviously, Rey Mysterio has to be up there. Jeff Hardy, The Undertaker, Bray Wyatt. And I think the reason why The Undertaker was such a big wrestler for me was because of the fact that he had that aura. He had this dark character. Like every time that he came out, you couldn't help but just sit there and just watch. And I mean, I've even showed my dad professional wrestling, which I'll get back to after this. But even he has sat there and watched it, and The Undertaker like even made him pay attention. And for my dad to pay attention to a professional wrestler after him loving boxing, let me tell you, you've got to be something special. And I remember, like even him telling me that he had like a really, really good character. And then I started explaining to him about The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. And that was something that to me really made that character so special, was because once you got into it and you understood the WrestleMania undefeated streak, it's almost like you understood why The Undertaker was still like this. I don't know how to explain it. It was like he was this ultimate final boss. And that's one reason why I think that professional wrestling changed at one point, was because they had Brock Lesnar beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. And that's what ended the undefeated streak, 21-1. And to me, that's one point in which professional wrestling changed forever, because if you look at the longevity of that storyline, like WrestleMania only gets hosted once a year. So it's like the Super Bowl of professional wrestling. So for him to go 21 years straight of him winning every single time at WrestleMania, and then to have a superstar like Brock Lesnar come in and beat him, what kind of championship or storyline or anything that a professional wrestler can get into that is actually going to mean as much as 21 years working in that storyline? Like, to me, like there isn't anything that anybody can do that can compare to that longevity of a storyline. And like that's when I feel like things really changed, because beforehand, that was the pinnacle. If you could face The Undertaker at WrestleMania, or if you could beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania, that should be like the biggest goal and the biggest accomplishment any professional wrestler could possibly imagine, because people already almost think or dream about performing at WrestleMania, winning the WWE Championship. But could you imagine beating the guy who has made himself known because of WrestleMania? That is an accomplishment like nobody can top. And that's, to me, when everything really started to change. And at that same exact event, at WrestleMania 30, Daniel Bryan had actually won the WWE Championship. And Daniel Bryan is kind of a smaller dude. I wouldn't say that, he's small. I was like, compared to me, shit, he's big. But compared to other professional wrestlers, he's relatively small. And typically before then, we would get a lot of professional wrestlers that they had to be like the bodybuilder type, that's why they had WWE 205, where, you had to at least be 205 pounds to even perform. And I feel like after that event happened, just the overall scene changed. How we look at professional wrestlers, how we perceive somebody who is maybe smaller. After that event, I feel like everybody knew that you could get over and you could become a very big professional wrestler and still be small. Because it doesn't matter about your size. It doesn't matter if you're big or you're small, or, maybe you feel like you're scrawny, or, you're not as big. All of that doesn't matter. And I feel like that was the event in which all of that kind of changed. And you could even go through the annals of WWE history and see how it did change after that event. It was absolutely insane. And so I had brought up earlier that I was going to get back into my dad watching professional wrestling. And this is probably like my favorite story to tell, especially about my childhood and everything. So there was a time in which my dad was pretty depressed. And I remember him laying in his bed, and I walked in and I went and I just checked on him, just to see if he was okay. And I was like, "Hey, do you want to sit there and, watch some TV with me?" He was like, "Yeah, come on." So I get into his bed and we're kind of just chilling out and whatever. And 8 o'clock rolls around, and I try to get off the bed, and he is like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "SmackDown's about to be on. I'm gonna go watch it in the living room." And he was like, "How come we can't just watch it here?" And I was like what? Like you'll actually sit there and like watch wrestling with me? Like that would be awesome. And he was like, absolutely. I was like, cool, dude, let's do it. So we sat there and we were watching the event, and I remember there was this certain period where it got to like a commercial break, and he sat there and he like pinned me, and he started just like slamming me around and just wrestling with me and whatever. And it was every single commercial break he would sit there and just start wrestling with me. And I remember one time he put me into a pin, so he had me on the ground. He was sitting there pinning me. He was like, come on, Cody, kick out. Like, if you want to become a professional wrestler, you got to learn how to kick out. And it was just so awesome. And like, that will always go down as like probably my most favorite memory of my childhood was my dad sitting there wrestling with me and watching the event with me. And I remember the match, the main event. It would be really cool to go back and actually find the date in which everything had happened. But back then they had the Raw Rewind. So, like I said earlier, Monday Night Raw was on commercial or was on cable. Friday Night SmackDown was for the free TV. Well, they had what was called the Raw Rewind. So anybody who had basic television could actually see a little glimpse of what happened on Monday Night Raw. Well, that night they had a Raw Rewind where it was a full match. So we got to see The Undertaker versus The Great Khali in a last man standing match for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. And I remember that specifically because I remember me and my dad were sitting there watching it, and it was one of the only times in which he like got into it. Like he understood the psychology of what was being told in the ring. And I remember the Great Khali getting stuck in the ropes, like he was hung up on the ropes. And then the Undertaker, the only way to be able to actually knock the Great Khali down, he picked up the steel steps and he went and he hit him with the steel steps as he was laying on the ropes. And that was the only way that the Undertaker could get the Great Khali down, because the Great Khali was so over at that time as far as a big man is concerned. And so like that really, really stuck with me. And I don't know, I would just say that was probably my favorite memory and my favorite memory to share, because it meant so much to me. I want to talk about WrestleMania 26. Okay, because like there's a lot of debate online about what is the greatest professional wrestling match of all time. And I would say a majority of people would say WrestleMania 25, The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. And I 100% agree with that. That match was unbelievable to watch live. Like, it was insane. But I would say, to me, the greatest story to ever be told is an extension on that. That was at WrestleMania 26 when Shawn Michaels re-challenged The Undertaker, and it was streak versus career. And the whole reason why I say that is because, yes, the match at WrestleMania 25 was absolutely amazing. It was that was a good match. But let's fast forward to the next year, and Shawn Michaels re-challenges The Undertaker. And the whole reason why, to me, this story meant so much more is because of the match at WrestleMania 25. Everybody believed that Shawn Michaels could have been the one to break the undefeated streak of The Undertaker, because Shawn Michaels was known as Mr. WrestleMania. So for Mr. WrestleMania to be able to take out the WrestleMania undefeated streak, and then for everybody to believe it and actually feel that energy of, no, he could actually do it. Like, this could be the time in which The Undertaker loses his streak. Everybody believed that going into WrestleMania 26. Like, Shawn Michaels had a chance. He had a chance to do it. And that to me is like what makes the WrestleMania 26 story so much better, is because of the fact that we've already seen what Shawn Michaels can do in the ring, like we had seen at WrestleMania 25. Now let's see if he could actually get it done. And that's what made it so exciting. So to me, that was the greatest professional wrestling story to be told. And it was absolutely insane to be able to sit there and witness as a professional wrestling fan. Like I would never change that for the world. I really, really wouldn't. Um, so I was just sitting there talking about The Undertaker, and so it was in 2018. I think it was the Super Showdown where we had Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker versus Kane and The Undertaker, or Triple H and Shawn Michaels. I apologize. Triple H and Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker and Kane. Well, there was this show that was being held at the Key Arena in Seattle. And it was about a week before the event, it was announced that The Undertaker was going to be at that event. And I remember looking at my baby mama, and I was like, I need to go to this event, because this is going to be the last time I'm going to be able to see The Undertaker live. And I need to be able to see him at least one more time before he ends up retiring. And he did end up retiring about 2 years later, and he still hasn't returned to Seattle. And I remember, so we were sitting in like the 300 section, because I had to like quickly buy tickets and, pay for gas and, all of that stuff so that we could actually get up there. And we were sitting in the 300 section, and there was this dude that was sitting next to me, and he had his son that was sitting right next to him. Well, this dad just did not give a fuck about being there. Like, he didn't care. He was just sitting there like this, like, I really don't care. Well, him and his son ended up like swapping seats. So he was sitting next to me. And we ended up, sitting there talking a little bit, and he asked me who my favorite wrestler was, and I told him that it was The Undertaker, and he said that his was Shawn Michaels, and that he's really excited about seeing him and whatnot. And it was really cool, because I felt like me and him kind of got to like bounce off of each other a little bit. And when The Undertaker's gong went off, when it went dong, I jumped up. I started like, yes, let's go. And the little kid sat there and jumped up too. And we were both looking at each other like, whoa, let's go. It was awesome. Especially just to have or to be that person that like they can kind of bounce off of, instead of having somebody just, you know what I mean? So that was really, really cool. And it's really crazy to predict that would be the last time that you'd be able to see The Undertaker, and then for it to actually be true. Like, I knew that was going to be the last time that I would ever be able to see The Undertaker live in person. And I'm actually really, really happy about that. I'm glad that, I took that opportunity to just go and finally say like a final goodbye, in a sense. You know what I mean? So that was a really, really crazy story that I felt like, talking to you guys about. So let's kind of start to talk about this podcast and why I really, really started it. So I think if you know me, you know that professional wrestling like means the world to me. Like, I've brought up earlier, like I've straight cried to my family over professional wrestling, and the one thing that I've always wanted to do was be a part of professional wrestling. Like, I don't have to be a wrestler, because I know a lot of people, like, immediately when they have a dream of doing something in professional wrestling, it's, I want to be a wrestler, or like Sledge was bringing up in a podcast, like, I want to win the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. I just want to be in pro wrestling. Like, I don't care if I'm a referee, if I'm, ring announcer, if I'm setting up the ring, if I'm selling merchandise, if I'm selling tickets. I don't care about any of that. I just want to be in professional wrestling. And this was my way of not only being able to accomplish that, but also being able to help out the industry that I love, because I do. I absolutely love this industry. And if there's any way that I can give back to it because of the fact that it has helped me so much in my life, that's what I want to do. And that's why I started doing, giving my perspectives on the news or the rumors or reviews and all of that. But there was this certain toxicity that went with that, because like you can't go and be reviewing something or talking about rumors or news and say that everything is perfect. Like, as a critic, whether you're critiquing restaurants or whatnot, you can't just go in and say that everything is perfect. So like there has to be some kind of critique that you can give it. And that was something that I didn't like. I didn't like having to look at something that I genuinely felt was good, but still trying to sit there and find a critique for it. Like that just messed with me a little bit. And that's why I stopped doing, the news and rumors and all of that stuff. Cause I did not like the community that you find when you get into that stuff. And that's when I started doing professional wrestler interviews. And my first interview was with Derek Drexel. And I cannot thank that dude enough for the opportunity that I was given. Because like I said, I've always wanted to do something in professional wrestling, just because it means so much to me. And so for somebody to give me that opportunity to jumpstart something and to see how it's grown today, like I can't thank him enough for that, because like I said, I've always wanted to do something in professional wrestling. Like I just really, really want to give back to the industry that I love. And that's the whole reason why I started this podcast, is because I do want to give all of the people a platform where they can come on and maybe I can introduce them to new people. Maybe I can get new eyes on them. Maybe I can get new people to want to come to shows or get into professional wrestling. And that was just like the whole reason why I started this podcast. Is because I want to give back to this industry. And this is the only way that I know how to at this point without actually being in professional wrestling. But I hope that one day I can possibly do something where I could really, really just give this industry everything that I have. And that's the reason why I started doing everything. I think the time in which I said I want to do a podcast, I was sitting at this event. It was hosted by a company that no longer exists, that was in Salem, Oregon. And I was sitting there all night. Like, I got dropped off at 8 p.m. I didn't leave until 8 a.m. I was there for a straight 12 hours all the way through the night, watching match after match after match after match. And I remember sitting in the crowd and I was watching these two wrestlers, and just a bunch of questions just started like going through my mind. And then I remember sitting there and I was like, I wonder what it would be like to actually be able to ask these questions to these wrestlers. And back then I didn't really think that it was plausible. I didn't think that it was something that I could actually accomplish or do. And one of the wrestlers that I saw at that event, I was actually able to interview. His name is Max Burnside. And I remember hearing his name when he was making his entrance, and I heard Burnside. And I was like, That is perfect because of Portland. Like him being from Portland and then to be named after one of the most famous skate parks, one of the biggest, dang it, like just one of the biggest places as far as skateboarding goes. I immediately like understood like, oh, that is so awesome to have the last name Burnside and be from Portland. Like that is absolutely perfect. And I was able to tell him when I was interviewing him that it's really cool to be able to interview somebody to whom I initially saw when I was thinking about starting a podcast. And yeah, it's just crazy to like now be in that position where I can do this. And every single professional wrestler that I've interviewed, I want to personally thank. Like thank you guys so much for being able to give me the opportunity to not live out my dream, but live it out in a certain light. Cause you know, like I've been like I've been saying, like professional wrestling means it means so much to me. And it has definitely taken me out of a lot of dark places. Just like I am just like I know Jaden had said, where it's like there was just such a point that when you have something that you can really focus on and really just escape, that was something that really helped me growing up was having professional wrestling. And I'm sorry. Yeah, professional wrestling just means a lot to me. It really, really does. And that's why I just want to thank every single one of the wrestlers for being able to give me the opportunity to be able to live out my dream. So I just want to say that before I end up closing everything out. And this is how I got into professional wrestling. This is how I started everything, and I just want to thank everybody for not only, you know, allowing me to come into your household, or if you find anything that I did interesting, I just want to thank everybody for allowing me to do that, especially when it comes to professional wrestling. And remember, you guys, September 17th, interesting podcast is going to be interviewing Caden Cassidy. This is going to be an interview you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you guys ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I go live. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good day.